The fourth of our presentation skills series in getting your message across concentrates on format. The format in which we present our presentation is really critical. I'm going to take the next 3 or 4 minutes just to run through some of the critical elements of that which will really help you when you're considering your planning in terms of delivering presentations. I know there is a classic and I will have to share it with you. Remember, if you fail to prepare, you prepare to fail. So even this part of our presentation needs to be thought through, planned and prepared properly. I don't think there are any real off-the-cuff remarks. Usually every single one has been planned at some point. They may not have planned to do it today, but they did plan to do it sometime. So don't think anybody just speaks without this preparation. It doesn't happen. So let's look at our format first of all. S for structure. What structure will we follow? Let's decide what it's going to be and then let's make sure we signpost that structure for our audience. So for this session, we're looking at structure, we're looking at notes, we're looking at the 3 Ps, we're looking at visuals, anecdotes, humour and rehearsals. So there's a bit of a structure there for you to follow as we move through now. So first of all, structure and signposts. How do we signpost our way through this whole presentation? What sort of sequence should we have? Chronological is a good way of doing things. What happened first? What happened next? Where did it go from there? So we get a nice build-up of right at the beginning, moving through in almost like a diary process until we get to either the present day or the future. The second of our options is to think about where are we now? And where are we now might be positive or negative, and it's kind of, let's give us some examples of where we are, then let's look at where we might be. When we've looked at where we might be, let's share some anecdotes and some stories and then come back to where we are right now. And then we can look again at where we're going to be. So as we move through, we're here, we make these changes, we move here. Well, we're here, we make these changes and we move on again. So it's almost like this sort of a shape. If you take various examples, but the Martin Luther King speech is a classic, that follows very much that same pattern. You'd find it quite fascinating if you listen to just a few minutes of that and see where he is, where we are now and where we're going to be. Always ending with the very positive, what it's going to be like when we get there. So that's a nice way for structure. And obviously you could have, this is where we are, this is what's wrong with where we are right now, this is where we want to be, and these are the benefits of getting there, and then this is how we're actually going to make that progress. So we can really see that there is a good structure to follow, but let the audience know what that structure is before you begin. What do we do with notes? Well, I'm sure you've seen people who have all sorts of notes. Sometimes they might have a big sheet of A4 paper, which can wobble and shake all around. Some people use index cards. They're a good idea if you're feeling slightly anxious. Please only write on one side of the card. Put numbers on the card and make sure the words that you include are big enough for you to see at a glance. Don't ever write sentences unless it's a particular quote that you need to say exactly word for word. But what do I mean by big enough? Well, if you were going to type them out, then it's usually at least a 14 or 16 point font size. Avoid serifs. Times New Roman, I'm afraid, is not top of the list. It's not a good idea. Something like the Arials, Verdanas, Tahomas, those sorts of fonts are actually much easier for you to read at a glance. Keep your notes to single words or maybe just 1 or 2 words. And if you can do without them altogether, then do so. A PowerPoint slide is not really intended to be your note. It is there for the audience, but it can help you as well. So why not make it do both jobs if you can? The 3 Ps. The 3 Ps are about how do we say something. The first P is positive. This is how it will work. This is something that we should do. This is a good idea. There are positive benefits from doing whatever it may be. So have a positive feel to everything you're saying. Precise. If there's 51%, better to say there's 51% than, ooh, a majority. It always feels like you're being a little bit sneaky. Make sure you're as honest and as open as you can, but be precise in what you're saying. If it's going to happen next week, say next week. not some general time in the future. And third P, pertinent. Make it relevant to the audience. Make that content live for them so that they can see how it can work in their world. So what about these visuals? We've mentioned PowerPoints already. Nice rule of thumb for a PowerPoint, no more than 7 words across and 7 lines down. That's really what our maximum should be. And do remember that a picture paints 1,000 words. So if an image is going to give you the impression and give the audience the information they need, use an image. But please, can you label it if that's necessary? So if somebody hasn't been listening to you for a moment and they see the image on the screen, they do know exactly what it is there for. So don't just assume they will understand, they might not. PowerPoint, of course, is not the only thing. A flip chart might be your very best ally. A flip chart lives, it's something you can work with. It really can be a friend. You can pre-prepare them, you can think in advance what you're going to add to them, or you can just respond to questions instantly by using a flip chart to work from. It all gives us a really good format and some variety within our presentation. Handouts. They're certainly part of the way in which we will format and structure our presentation. If you are going to use handouts, some people like to give them at the beginning, almost like a workbook. That's great. Other people will give them at the time that they are needed, and yet others prefer to save them until the very end, and nobody actually gets the handout until the presentation is over. You need to decide on what the purpose of your handout is before you can make that decision. But sometimes that handout in itself can act as a visual. But if you are going to hold it up, hold it nicely, hold it as if it has a real value. Don't hold it like just a scrappy piece of paper. Give it some respect. There may be many of us who are good at telling jokes. There may be others who are not. But really, a presentation is not the place for us to tell jokes. By all means, introduce humour and have something that's interesting. If people can smile and laugh gently, that's nice. But this is not a joke-telling session, so that's not appropriate, not for this time. And finally, rehearse. Rehearse what you're going to say and rehearse how you're going to say it. If you do have handouts and materials, where will you put them? How will you move them from one place to another? How will you move your arms? How will you gesture? How are you going to manage to look at all the audience at the same time? Are you going to be formal? Are you going to be informal? Is it a table? Is it nothing? Is it a lectern? All of those things need to be planned in advance and then rehearsed. At the end of the day, though, don't forget your purpose. Why are you there? The audience need to know why you're there, what they're going to get from it, what their benefits are, what's in it for them, and then your format should follow naturally from there. So, good luck with all your planning, all your preparation, and future videos will also be looking at presentation skills, the how to deliver.